The cheapest thing Caleb Rook bought that summer was a square of blue paper. The dearest thing it cost him was his pride. He stood in the stage depot at Ashfork Crossing with one bent pen between his teeth and the paper trembling in his hand. Outside, the New Mexico sun had turned the street white. Inside, the room smelled of horse sweat, lamp oil, old tobacco, and dust baked into every board. Men who had been arguing over freight prices stopped talking. The depot clerk looked up from his ledger. Two teamsters near the stove leaned sideways to see what Caleb had written. He had practiced the sentence all the way into town. He had scratched it out 3 times before choosing the plainest words he could bear. Wife needed. Dry farm, 120 acres, sober household. Must have courage and be willing to work. Ask for Caleb Rook, Black Mesa Road. He pinned it to the depot wall beneath a notice for lost mules and a poster offering reward for a horse thief. Then he stood there, staring at the blue paper, as if staring long enough might make it less pitiful. It did not. Behind him, somebody laughed. "Well, now," Buck Harlan drawled, "Black Mesa's gotten so poor it has to advertise for women." A few men chuckled, grateful for a cruelty they did not have to invent themselves. Caleb kept his hand against the wall for one breath longer. His thumb had bled where the bent pen went through the paper. That small red dot seemed to accuse him. He had not come to town looking for romance. He had come because his roof leaked, his corn had burned in the ground, his last mare had gone lame, and Cyrus Bell held his note. Bell owned the depot, the supply counter, the freight scale, and by some invisible extension, half the people who walked past them. Without help, Caleb would lose the claim his mother had died protecting and his father had died trying to improve. With help, he might only lose it slower. "Tell us, Rook," Cyrus Bell said from behind the counter, smooth as polished bone. "What exactly is the lucky lady getting? A mud roof? A dry cistern? 2 hens and a mortgage?" More laughter. Bell stepped into the open. He was a broad man with a white shirt too clean for that country and a gold watch chain bright against his vest. He smiled as though the whole scene saddened him. "You should have come to me before humiliating yourself," Bell said. "I would still take that land off your hands, clear your debt, give you a wagon south." Caleb turned around. He was not a large man. Heat and work had pared him down to rope and bone. But something in him, perhaps the last stubborn thing, would not let him lower his eyes in front of Bell. "My land is not yours," Caleb said. "Not yet," Bell answered, "but the month is young." The room enjoyed that. Caleb reached for his hat. He had already made the mistake. The only mercy left was to leave before the town could chew on him any longer. Then a broom stopped moving. In the far corner, beside the stacked mail sacks, a young Chinese woman stood with both hands around a broom handle. She had been sweeping the depot floor so quietly that most men forgot she was there, unless they wanted someone to mock or order around. Her black hair was braided down her back. Her gray cotton dress was plain and carefully mended. She was small enough to be overlooked, and still enough to be mistaken for afraid. Caleb had seen her before. Everyone had. No one had ever truly looked. She set the broom against the wall. The depot went quiet in an uneven way, as if the silence were spreading from man to man. She crossed the room without hurry. Her shoes made almost no sound. She walked past Cyrus Bell, past the teamsters, past the clerk's desk, and stopped in front of Caleb's blue notice. She read it once, then again. Her face gave nothing away. Bell made a little amused sound. "Careful, girl. That is not a laundry ticket." She did not look at him. She lifted one finger and touched the edge of the blue paper. Then she turned and pointed to herself. Someone snorted. Caleb felt heat rise in his face. "Miss, I don't think you understand what that says." For the first time in that depot, the young woman looked directly at him. Her eyes were dark, steady, and sharper than the room deserved. She said, "I understand." The words were soft, but they carried. The clerk froze with his pen in the air. Bell's smile twitched. Caleb stared at her. "You speak English?" "When useful," she said. The room had no laughter left. The woman looked once more at the notice, then back at Caleb. "I will go," she said. That was all. 3 words. But in Ashfork Crossing, where men believed a person was worth exactly what Cyrus Bell said they were worth, those 3 words struck the room harder than a gunshot. Caleb Rook had advertised for a wife because he was out of options. And the forgotten Chinese woman sweeping the depot floor had just answered him in front of every man who had come to watch him break. Her name was Mara Lin. Caleb learned that on the long ride out to Black Mesa Road, though not because she volunteered much else. She sat beside him on the wagon seat with a cloth bundle in her lap and a straw hat pulled low against the sun. The bundle seemed too small to contain a life. The mule plodded through the heat. The town fell behind them. The land opened into red shelves of stone, pale grass, thorn bush, and sky so wide it made a man feel both free and exposed. Caleb tried twice to speak, and failed twice. Shame sat between them like a third passenger. At last he said, "You don't have to stay once you see it." Mara kept her eyes on the road. "I saw men laughing." That wasn't the land. It was enough. He could not tell whether she meant enough warning or enough reason to leave. When they reached his claim, Caleb wished he had found a way to describe it more honestly before arrival. The place was not a farmhouse so much as a compromise with weather. A low adobe room leaned into the side of a rise. The roof was patched with brush and old canvas. A crooked shed held 2 skinny goats. One corner of the corral sagged as if tired of pretending. The field beyond was worse. Rows Caleb had planted in faith lay brittle and silvered in the sun. The cistern beside the house was covered with boards, but the smell rising through them was sour mud. A line of salt crust marked the ground where water used to stand. He helped Mara down from the wagon. "This is it," he said. He meant to add an apology, but there were too many. Mara walked the property as if reading a page. She looked under the cistern lid. She crouched by the dead corn and crumbled soil between her fingers. She studied the slope, the goat tracks, the way wind had combed sand into the fence corners. Then she walked east toward a shallow wash where 3 thin cottonwoods clung to life. Caleb followed at a distance, baffled. She stopped near a patch of weed he had cursed all spring. Its leaves were dull and bluish. Its roots seemed to grip the earth like wire. Mara touched it, then pressed her palm to the ground. Caleb said, "Nothing grows there worth keeping." She looked back. "Bring the mattock." He almost laughed, but there was no humor in her face. "That ground is rock." "Bring the mattock," she repeated. He should have refused. He had spent years learning what Black Mesa would and would not give. He knew every hard patch, every useless wash, every failure by name. But an hour earlier, this woman had walked across a room full of laughter and chosen his ruin as if it were a door. So he brought the mattock. She took it from him with both hands, tested the weight, and began breaking the hard crust around the weed. Her strokes were not powerful, but they were precise. She worked the way a person works when every motion has already been measured. After a minute, Caleb took the mattock back. "If there's foolish digging to be done," he said, "I'll do it." Mara stepped aside. They worked until the light thinned. At first there was only dust and stone. Then, 18 inches down, the soil changed color. Not much, just enough. Caleb knelt and rubbed it between his fingers. It held together, damp. His throat tightened. Mara's expression did not change, but her shoulders eased as if she had been waiting for the ground to admit what she already knew. By dark they had widened the hole and lined its sides with flat stones. A small brown seep collected at the bottom, no wider than a dinner plate, but shining. Water. Not salvation, not yet, but water. Caleb stood over it with dirt up to his elbows and a feeling in his chest he had almost forgotten how to recognize. Mara dipped a tin cup, let the mud settle, and held it out. He took a careful sip. It tasted of iron, clay, and mercy. The next morning, Cyrus Bell came to see the joke for himself. He rode in with Buck Harlan and a deputy named Sykes, who looked less like law than a man waiting to be paid. Their horses raised a pale trail of dust that drifted over Caleb's dead corn and Mara's freshly swept doorstep. Bell did not dismount at first. His eyes moved over the property with proprietary dislike. He noticed the new digging near the wash. He noticed the stones stacked beside it. He noticed Mara standing in the doorway, sleeves rolled to the elbow, holding a coil of wire she had been using to mend the goat pen. "Rook," Bell called, "I heard you remove my floor girl without finishing her account." Caleb stepped down from the adobe room. "She owed you no account." Belle smiled. Everybody owes something. Mara's eyes lowered, not in submission, Caleb realized, but in calculation. Belle dismounted then. He walked to the seep and looked down into it. For the first time since Caleb had known him, Cyrus Bell's face lost its pleasant arrangement. "That's a puddle," Belle said. "It is water," Mara answered. Belle turned toward her slowly. "Did I ask you?" Caleb moved before he thought. He placed himself between them. Belle saw it and smiled again, but the smile had sharpened. "You have a tender heart, Rook. That is why you'll die poor." He drew a folded paper from inside his vest. "Your note comes due at the end of the month. $173, plus freight penalties, seed advance, and interest." "End of the month," Caleb said. "Not today." "Today, tomorrow, next week." Belle flicked the paper. "Makes no difference. You cannot pay it." Deputy Sykes cleared his throat without conviction. Belle continued. "Sign the claim over. I will mark the debt settled. You can leave before winter. Take her if you insist, or leave her to work off what she still owes." The hand at Caleb's side closed. Mara said nothing. Belle stepped closer and lowered his voice just enough to make it cruel. "Do not let one damp hole confuse you. A little water only makes your land more valuable to the man who is going to own it." He rode away satisfied. But that evening, when Caleb carried another bucket from the seep, something fell from Mara's collar and struck the stone beside the doorway. A small brass disc spun in the dust. Caleb picked it up. It was not jewelry, not exactly. It was a round plate of brass, darkened by age, etched with tiny lines and dots too delicate for ordinary ornament. Around the edge were characters he could not read. In the center was a pattern of stars. Mara saw it in his hand, and for a moment the stillness left her face. He held it out at once. "I'm sorry. It fell." She took it carefully. "My father's sky plate," she said. Caleb waited. The crickets began their thin evening song. Mara rubbed her thumb over the brass. "He made instruments, small ones, because we could carry little. He measured shadows, stars, water levels, roads." She looked toward the darkening wash. "He said the earth writes in many languages. A hungry person must learn more than one." "You learn from him?" "Everything useful." Caleb sat on the doorstep, leaving room beside him. After a while, Mara sat too. The moon was not yet up. The sky had begun to crowd with stars. She told him her father had been Lin Wen, a teacher and maker of measuring instruments from Guangdong, who had come west with railroad surveyors because the desert air was clear and the nights were honest. He believed he could earn enough mapping routes to build a small observatory somewhere dry and high. He died of fever 2 weeks after their guide abandoned them. The men who were supposed to deliver his crates sold what they could, burned what they could not understand, and brought Mara to Ashfork Crossing as if she were baggage with hands. Cyrus Bell called it an arrangement. Everyone else found it easier to agree. "I kept silent," she said. "Silent people are paid less attention." Caleb looked at the brass disc in her palm. "But you could read. You could speak." "And if I spoke, who would listen?" He had no answer that would not shame him. She turned the disc toward the stars, aligning one etched mark with the evening sky. "My father told me America was a place where a person could begin again," she said. "He was wrong in many ways, but not all." Caleb looked out over the land he had nearly surrendered in his heart long before Bell tried to take it on paper. "I put that notice up because I needed another pair of hands," he admitted. "That was all I thought I was asking for." Mara did not look offended. Hands matter. "Not as much as I thought." For the first time, she smiled. It was small, brief, and startlingly warm. Over the next week, the claim changed in ways Caleb would not have believed if anyone had described them. The seep did not dry by morning. It deepened. Mara showed him how to widen the pit without letting the sides collapse, how to line the channel with stone, how to guide the water into a shallow settling trough before filling buckets. She cut narrow furrows rather than broad ditches, covering parts of them with brush to slow the sun. She planted beans where Caleb would have planted corn, and moved the goats to manure the worst soil before turning it. She used less water than Caleb had used in despair, and made it do twice the work. But water also brought attention. By the second week, 2 freight wagons stopped at the road asking to fill barrels. The drivers had heard, somehow, that Rook's place had water when the public tank east of town had gone foul. Caleb almost waved them away. Mara named a price first. 3 cents per barrel, she said, 1 cent for each horse. The drivers grumbled. Then they paid. That night, Caleb placed 12 copper coins on the table and stared at them as though they were a prophecy. Mara pushed a chipped jar toward him. "For the note," she said. "For the note," he repeated. It was absurd. It was nothing. It was the first money the land had earned without going through Bell's counter. By the time Cyrus Bell returned, the jar held $2.16. Bell brought papers this time. He also brought Deputy Sykes, Buck Harlan, and a stranger in a black coat who claimed to be a clerk from the territorial office. The stranger never quite met anyone's eyes. Bell did not bother with courtesy. "I am calling the debt," he said. Caleb wiped his hands on his trousers. "You already tried frightening me with that." "This is not fright. It is procedure." Bell unfolded a paper covered in cramped writing. "Your note contains an acceleration condition. If the property securing the debt is altered, neglected, impaired, or put to commercial use without the creditor's consent, the full sum may be demanded immediately." Caleb felt the words land like stones. Bell gestured toward the watering trough. "You are selling water. That is commercial use." "We're earning money to pay you." "Without my consent." Deputy Sykes looked at the ground. Bell held out a pen. "Sign over the claim. I will discharge the debt and forget the matter of the Chinese woman residing here without proper labor papers." Mara stood in the doorway, still as a blade. Caleb could feel the trap closing exactly where Bell wanted it. If he fought, Bell would use the law against Mara. If he signed, he would save her only by handing both their futures to the man who had harmed her. His father would have told him to preserve what life he could. His mother would have told him that some things are not preserved by surrender. Caleb took the pen. Bell's smile widened. Then Caleb snapped it in half. Ink spotted the dust between them. "No," Caleb said. The word did not come out loud, but it came out clean. Bell's face hardened. "Deputy, you witnessed refusal." "I witnessed it," Sykes said, unhappy. "You have 48 hours," Bell told Caleb. "Then I bring a wagon and men enough." He turned to Mara. "And I bring questions for you." After they left, the claim seemed smaller. The sky seemed too large. Caleb stood by the broken pen in the dust and understood that courage did not feel like strength. It felt like terror with nowhere to go. Mara came beside him. "Let me see the paper," she said. "The note?" "All of it." He brought out the loan packet from the tin box under his bed. He had avoided reading it for months because every line reminded him how little schooling he had, and how completely Belle understood that fact. Mara carried it to the table. She lit the lamp before sunset, cleaned her hands, and began. Caleb watched her read. Not skim, not guess, read. Her finger moved over each line. Sometimes she turned back. Sometimes she held two pages beside each other and compared the ink. Once she took her father's brass sky plate and used its straight edge to check whether a paragraph had been written at the same angle as the rest. Hours passed. Outside, the water ticked into the settling trough. At last Mara said, "He added this later." Caleb leaned over. She pointed to the acceleration clause. The words were crowded between printed sections, written in Belle's elegant hand. "It is his writing," Caleb said. "Does that help us?" "It hurts him," Mara answered. "This form says changes after signing must be witnessed by two persons and acknowledged by the county recorder." Caleb stared. Was it? "Was anyone there when you signed?" "Belle? The clerk? Me." "No county recorder?" "No." "No second witness?" "No." Mara pointed again. "Then this clause is not part of your promise." Hope rose so quickly Caleb mistrusted it. "What about the water business?" She turned another page. "The printed note secures crop and dwelling use. It says nothing about roadside watering. He knew that, so he wrote new words. But new words must be made properly." Caleb sat down slowly. Mara was not finished. She opened Belle's payment receipts. "And here, he charged freight penalty on seed he never delivered to your house." "I fetched it myself." "Then he charged for work not done." She moved another receipt. "Here, interest counted from March. You received the loan in April." "Can a judge care about that?" Mara looked at him. "A judge may not care about you," she said, "but he will care if Belle's papers are dirty." The next 48 hours were the longest of Caleb's life. Mara wrote a statement in a hand so neat it looked printed. Caleb rode before dawn to the mission school 20 miles south, where an old sister who remembered Lin Win agreed to read the statement and attach her own note saying Mara Lin was no bound laborer, but the daughter of a free man known to the survey office. Then Caleb rode to the county seat. He did not ask for kindness. He filed objections. He paid the fee with nearly every coin from the jar. When Belle arrived with 2 wagons on the appointed morning, he found not an empty doorway, but Caleb Rook standing beside Deputy Sykes with a stamped paper in his hand. The deputy read it twice. Belle demanded it. Sykes did not give it to him. "County judge says no removal until hearing," the deputy said. Belle's jaw worked. "On whose authority?" Sykes looked at the stamp. "His." The hearing was held 12 days later in the back room of the mission. because the circuit judge's wagon had broken an axle, and the whole county seemed to take that as a summons to come watch Cyrus Bell be inconvenienced. Bell arrived confident. He left before noon without looking at anyone. The judge found the handwritten acceleration clause improper and unenforceable. He questioned the freight penalty. He questioned the interest. He questioned why Bell had described Mara as a labor debt when 2 witnesses confirmed her father had held paid survey contracts. By the end, the judge did not erase Caleb's debt. Life was not a fairy tale, and paper did not become mercy simply because a good person needed it. But he struck the false charges, reduced the interest to lawful terms, and gave Caleb 9 months to pay. 9 months. To a rich man, it was delay. To Caleb and Mara, it was a future. By winter, Black Mesa Road had changed its habits. Freight drivers planned their stops by Rook's watering trough. A stage company sent word asking whether teams could be watered twice weekly. Caleb built a shade frame with cottonwood poles. Mara kept a ledger of barrels, horses, dates, coins, and names, cleaner than any record Cyrus Bell had ever pretended to keep. The field did not become green all at once. It changed in stubborn pieces. Beans first, then squash, then onions in a narrow bed beside the adobe wall. The goats grew rounder. The hens began laying again. Caleb repaired the roof, then the door, then the window frame he had always promised himself he would fix when life gave him a season to breathe. Life did not give him one. They made one. In town, men who had laughed at the blue notice began lowering their voices when Caleb entered the depot. Some nodded. A few pretended they had always known Bell was crooked. Buck Harlan stopped making jokes after Mara corrected his freight count in front of 3 drivers and saved him from overpaying by 6 cents. Cyrus Bell still owned the depot, but he no longer owned the story. On the last evening of the year, Caleb and Mara stood beside the stone-lined seep, now covered with a proper wooden frame. The air had gone cold enough to sharpen every star. Frost silvered the brush. The water below reflected a trembling piece of sky. Mara wore a dark blue work dress she had sewn from cloth bought with her own money. At her throat hung the brass sky plate, no longer hidden under gray cotton. Caleb held out his hand. She took it. Neither of them spoke for a while. In the beginning, he had thought she answered his notice because she needed shelter. Later, he thought she had saved his land because she knew water, paper, and law better than he did. Both things were true, but not the whole truth. She had seen something in that depot no one else saw. Not a rescuer, not a husband worth admiring, just a man humiliated enough to be honest, standing under the weight of a sentence he could barely afford to write. And she had decided that honesty, even desperate honesty, might be ground firm enough to stand on. "My father would have measured this sky," Mara said. Caleb looked up. The stars were fierce and countless. What would he have called it? She smiled, her eyes still lifted. A beginning. Caleb thought of the blue paper on the depot wall, the bent pen, the laughter, the way Mara's finger had touched that notice before she turned it toward herself. He had asked for someone unafraid of work. What came to his door was a woman who could read the desert, read the stars, read the trap in a rich man's ink, and read the worth in a life everyone else had priced too low. The world had called her silent. It had called him finished. Together, they proved the world had been reading both of them wrong. And on that hard piece of desert, under a sky wide enough to hold every loss and every promise, Caleb Rook finally understood that a home is not the land a man refuses to lose. It is the place where two people choose to stand shoulder to shoulder until the future has no choice but to come toward them.